Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, it's a great honor for me today to welcome you to this very unique celebration of the World Science Day for Peace and Development 2020. We are also delighted at UNESCO to welcome you here on this very particular day for peace and sustainable development under the auspices of UNESCO. We are all aware and we are living in very difficult times today. Since 2001, every 10th of November, we at UNESCO celebrate this event of the World Science Day for Peace and Development across the world. The 10th of November is an auspicious day. We ensure that no one is left behind. The main objective of the celebration of World Science Day for Peace and Development is really to strengthen the link between science and society and to highlight the relevance of science in our everyday life, meeting the challenges of common day life. We therefore engage in debates on topical global issues in science and challenges, opportunities for the world at large to embrace science as a public good. This year, the World Science Day for Peace and Development comes at a very, very opportune moment. The world is struggling at the same time with the global pandemic, and at the same time, we see the greatest advances in science and technology. Hence, the focus of the World Science Day this year, today, is on science for and with society in dealing with the COVID-19. For this specific occasion, we are organizing this online roundtable meeting to share with you good practices, to find new ideas of how we in the United Nations system, and especially UNESCO, with the mandate for science, can continue to build on its efforts to strengthen the interlinkages between science and society, to resolve global challenges with local solutions, but to also address the current COVID-19 pandemic. I wish to take this opportunity, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, your excellencies, to express my deep gratitude to all of you for joining us here today. My special appreciation goes to our keynote speaker, Professor Edith, as well as all our panelists who have joined us from across the world. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, these distinguished panelists include the Honorable Minister, Professor Amon Murwira, who is represented here by Dr. Willie Ganda, Professor Zakri Abdul Hamid, and Mrs. Melina Sakiyama. Our keynote speaker, of course, Professor Edith, is also online with us, and including all of you, our experts across the world. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this celebration provides a perfect opportunity to mobilize the scientific community, to bring science closer to society. The World Science Day for Peace and Society, for Peace and Development, really recognizes the need to bring science closer to society, to bolster the international community across the world to promote science for and with society to deal with COVID-19. And that is the theme of this year. Now more than ever, we have seen the unusual, unique solidarity among scientists across the world coming together and bringing all of science together, the natural and social sciences. So therefore, we need an integrated, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and I would say even multidisciplinary approach to fight this pandemic. And it is possible if we put all our resources and all the knowledge streams together. During this roundtable meeting, we will discuss 4 following actions which are necessary to bring science closer to society. Firstly, how to improve the dialogue between scientists, governments, and citizens. Governments and citizens alike must understand the language of science, the culture of science, and we all need to become scientific literate. An improved dialogue between scientists, the policymakers, and all actors of society is really critical and crucial to warrant the trust in science and to enable evidence-based policy and decision-making. And hence, the second action where it is necessary to bring science closer to society, which is called the evidence-based policymaking. How to enhance national capacities to ensure the latest evidence in science, technology, and innovation can contribute to decision-making so that parliamentarians need to legislate on societal issues that necessitate the latest scientific knowledge, that parliamentarians can count on the latest scientific knowledge, that we can ensure there is quality decision making based on science, technology, and innovation. National governments need to further strengthen science behind major global challenges, such as this global pandemic, but also not to forget the impact of climate change, the biodiversity loss which is striking across the world, the need to ensure biodiversity preservation, restoration, and transmission of our shared values for the living and for the social fabric of society, which is biodiversity, but also fresh water. Access to water is crucial to contain this pandemic. How then can we ensure evidence-based policy making to ensure that water is a common source for each and every person in the world today and ensure water security? A third area for action for evidence-based decision-making, but also to promote science closer to society to deal with the pandemic, is sharing in good time and timely knowledge and data. In this particular context, open science policies and access to science and technology can remove the obstacles to the free flow of research data and ideas, and thus accelerate pace of research, which is critical today to combat the disease. While national epidemiological databases on COVID-19 are vital for enabling governments to take steps to effectively address the crisis, such data must be pooled together for furthering global public health research and policies for common good and to ensure the future benefits of all and leaving no one behind. And finally, the last action where we need to work together collaboratively and inclusively is strengthening international scientific collaboration. UNESCO is the vanguard for promoting international scientific collaboration. That is the S in UNESCO, which stands for science, all of the sciences. We are in an interdependent world, very much interconnected. And international scientific collaboration can facilitate progress in the above mentioned issues. Under the facilitation, not only the United Nations banner, but UNESCO itself and its mandate. Through all of UNESCO's chairs, centers of excellence, intergovernmental programs, international science programs, the scientific community can access global science for local solutions. And we must continue to take part in the development of scientific and technological innovations to successfully combat the COVID-19 pandemic. Hence, UNESCO can promote and ensure the South-South-South collaboration in technology transfer. So therefore, in concluding and welcoming you to this special event today on the World Science Day for Peace and Development and this roundtable in a very unique time this year of the pandemic, I do hope that sometime in the future we will welcome you home to UNESCO. And I want to take this opportunity to invite all of you to work hand in hand to mobilize the broad range of stakeholders, including scientists, policymakers, entrepreneurs, women, youth, local indigenous knowledge, populations, and the public at large to promote science for and with society. We look forward to working with you, and we would like to put at your disposal all of UNESCO's international scientific programs built up since the early 1940s. Thank you for your kind attention, and I now hand you over to our colleague and moderator, Anna Pesch. And before I hand you over the floor to her, let me sincerely thank Anna Ashik and all her team, Jocelyn, Anna Paula, all of them online, and Fereshete, for bringing us together in this very important event to celebrate World Science Day for Peace and Development, but also to recall us the aim of this particular day in promoting international scientific solidarity. Thank you, Anna. Over to you.
Thank you, Shamila. I think the next part of our program is actually the message from the Director General of UNESCO. And unfortunately, Madame Audrey Azoulay could not be with us today, but Shamila has kindly agreed to read the message on her behalf. So Shamila, I leave you to read the message of Madame Azoulay on her behalf. The floor is now yours again.
Thank you very much, and I will try my best. Madame, Monsieur, chers collègues, bonjour.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, Good afternoon. It is a great honor for me to read out to you the message of Ms. Audrey Azoulay, Director General of UNESCO, today on this occasion of World Science Day for Peace and Development. Dear colleagues, the efforts of science should not only enable mankind to surpass itself, they must also help those who lag behind to catch up. So wrote in a 1951 article published in UNESCO Courier, the anthropologist and ethnologist Claude Lévi-Strauss. In this very special year in which our the resilience of our societies is being tested, it is with the same conviction that we are celebrating this World Science Day for Peace and Development under the theme Science for and with Society in Dealing with COVID-19. Science can play a very important role in helping us overcome this crisis and also to help us build more just, compassionate and sustainable societies. And the current crisis should serve as a wake-up call regarding the urgency for increased financing and support for scientific research and collaboration. This concerns the field of natural sciences, but also social and human sciences, because this virus is also an all-encompassing societal issue which cannot be reduced to epidemiological data, how fundamental that may be. Natural sciences will help us to understand the virus, and social and human sciences will enable us to look deep within our societies and to reveal their complexities by avoiding sterile oversimplification and false evidence. Social and human sciences have much to contribute again towards the fight against the pandemic, and we can only benefit from better integrating them in public policy. We've long been convinced at UNESCO of the potential of science, provided that it is shared within an ethical and humanistic framework, which is why UNESCO is extending its historic commitment to the ethics of science with the drafting of a global recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence. And this is aimed at ensuring that innovation is put to the service of all. At the time where we confront a historic pandemic, but also the climate crisis and the collapse of biodiversity, we cannot lose sight of the humanist vision of science. We cannot ignore scientific methodology and rigorous scientific reflection to ensure that science can unlock its full potential. UNESCO is preparing a recommendation on open science following a decision of member states in November 2019. This is not only to make science more effective, more diverse, by enabling anyone to contribute, but also to bring its objectives in line with the needs of society by developing scientific literacy and an informed citizenry, so they may take responsibility and be involved in collective decision-making. This recommendation is therefore an important step towards transforming all branches of science into a common good to serve the sustainable development of all our societies. And this is our fundamental objective, the objective we reaffirm on this World Science Day for Peace and Development. Thank you very much. Thank you. That was the message of the Director General of UNESCO, Ms. Audrey Azoulay, on the occasion of the World Science Day for Peace and Development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shamila. Thank you for the message of the Director General. We will move with the program now, and it is my pleasure to greet our keynote speaker, Professor Edith Hurd. Professor Edith Hurd is the Director General of the European Molecular Biology Sciences Laboratory and Professor and Chair of Epigenetics and Molecular Memory at the Collège de France. Professor Hurd is also the laureate of L'Oréal UNESCO Prize for Women in Science, and we are very proud to have her as part of our network. Without any further ado, Professor Hurd, I would like to invite you to deliver your keynote speech. The time is yours.
Thank you so much. I hope you can all hear me. Yes, good. And I hope you can see my screen appropriately. Yes. So it's a tremendous honor to be here today. I'm very happy to participate in this event. It's a very important and strange time for the world. And I believe that this kind of event is crucial for allowing, indeed, a debate and dialogue of science with society. And I hope that we all agree that this pandemic has demonstrated the importance of science, and that we can only fight it through global collaboration and by open science and rapid sharing of data and knowledge. And today, I hope that in my short presentation, I will convince you about the types of strategies that I believe we can take using the example of the organization that I direct, which is the European Molecular Biology Laboratory, EMBL. So the EMBL was established after another crisis that our world lived through, World War II. It was set up in 1974 as a response to the demand to make sure that science would be preserved and maintained in Europe, and in particular for the purpose of providing basic research without frontiers and research and science that would serve all of Europe and thereby all of the world. So EMBL has 5 missions, which are shown here. Our first mission is to provide excellent research. Our second mission is to provide many services to Europe, and the pandemic has illustrated the kind of service that is so important. We also provide advanced training. We train the next generation of scientists to have not only the scientific expertise that is required, but also the whole philosophy of open science, collaboration, and striving always for excellence and to overcome the challenges and set the new frontiers. So technology and development are very much also what EMBL has done. We have provided many of the tools that are being used today to fight the pandemic, from the generation of genomic data, which was one of EMBL's foundation achievements back in the 1990s, through the establishment of the European Bioinformatics Institute. And I will come to that later on in my speech. And finally, we have a very important role in trying to integrate life sciences across Europe and for the world. We are funded and supported by our 27 member states, and we have a very important role, I would say, as neutral, honest brokers for science, with no specific national accreditation, and therefore we can play this role of trying to share science and bringing scientists together across the world. So we are based on 6 different sites across Europe. The main site is in Heidelberg in Germany, but we have sites also in the UK, for example, the European Bioinformatics Institute, as well as in Spain, in Italy, in France, and another site in Germany, in Hamburg. Our missions, which I just went through, have been used to rise up against the SARS-CoV-2 virus and the pandemic that hit us. We were able to respond very quickly because we were set up by Europe for European science, and we have a flexibility to deliver whatever is required of us. So excellent research. Our services were immediately put at the disposal of scientists around Europe and the world. People could come with their samples to analyze in incredible detail the infected cells of humans, and to also try to use some of the most advanced technologies to be able to address this pandemic, including genomics, microscopy, cryomicroscopy, and others. We also have turned around much of our training towards the fight against this pandemic, and we very quickly set up a forum and a virtual conference in July 2020, and we've already organized 1 or 2 more of these to bring the experts together to share science openly and to discuss the latest challenges. And in terms of innovation and translation, EMBL has already been able to provide some of the key insights and also the tools that are important. And finally, I want to say a few words about the data portals, which I think are of great interest to today's talks and discussion. So just one brief summary of some of the collaborative and very multidisciplinary breakthroughs that were made. We were able to actually analyze, our scientists were able to analyze exactly how the virus is formed and to try and understand best how to target antibodies against the virus itself. We were also able to understand how this virus replicates and use this as a means to direct antiviral drugs for clinical purposes, and also to develop special mini antibodies that have high potential in binding to SARS-CoV-2 viral proteins and therefore act as inhibitors. But let me come to the COVID-19 data portals, which have been absolutely fundamental in the response that Europe has had to this crisis. So when responding to a health crisis, data plays a critical role in understanding the transmission and infection and in identifying drug targets, vaccines, or disease-related symptoms. The European COVID-19 data platform was one of the priorities in the Commission's Era versus Corona Action Plan, which builds up on strong foundations, bringing together established data infrastructures from the EMBL, as well as coordinated standards and best practices from Elixir, and leveraging the investments from research infrastructures and infection disease-specific projects of Horizon 2020. The platform was actually initiated as a priority pilot of the European Open Science Cloud and is fully embedded within its ecosystem. The COVID-19 data portals, the visible part of the platform that most users will interact with, was launched in April 2020 and had already been designed in December 2019, as soon as we heard that this pandemic was likely to spread. And this exposes the relevant data sets for sharing and analyzing data in an effort to accelerate coronavirus research. It is the interface and provides an entry point where researchers can upload, access, and analyze COVID-19 related reference data and specialist data sets. The platform is providing us with very important lessons and will be the basis for the development of the European Health Data Space Strategy. The ongoing crisis has thus helped to overcome many of the usual barriers related to data sharing and integration. And we would like to exploit this in order to have a means to ensure that in the future, data sharing and integration are as smooth and efficient as possible. And we have many good examples now of nationally coordinated health data and how this is now driving the pan-European response. So this is a very technical slide, but that simply shows that from the patient data and both the viral data and the human data, which is available, and this involves public health laboratories and national health data infrastructures, we are able to combine this viral genomic data with associated clinical outcomes into SARS-CoV-2 data hubs and a plethora of biomolecular data relating to the virus and its human and animal hosts, spanning gene expression, biochemical pathways, compounds, and drug targets. So national and local cohorts with genomes of COVID-19 patients can help to identify risk factors for disease progression. And data from national COVID-19 portals and other relevant resources like biobanks and clinical trials, as well as imaging repositories, where the level of integration depends on the depth and the complexity of the resources that are provided. The platform also offers tools, standards, and computational workflows to analyze often multifaceted data and combines multi-omics data with clinical, environmental, and even social science data. So this platform is incredibly powerful, and European countries and beyond are developing national data portals and integration points for COVID-19 data. So we believe that the COVID-19 crisis will transform the data sharing paradigm in health, and managed well, the response and recovery from the pandemic will propel Europe and the world into a leading position for data sharing, where our biggest challenge, cross-border collaboration, becomes our biggest priority. I just want to highlight that this project of the data portals has been showcased as a project in the 2020 Paris Peace Forum that will happen next week. So In addition, I already mentioned we have been able to set up courses and conferences and training activities. This pandemic has shown us the importance of transmitting information and training to people around the world. It has been an opportunity to share information and science. And this is, again, another very important lesson that we have all learned. We must share data for accelerated research. And I just want to also mention that EMBL has a role in sharing science for society. Yesterday, we completed our most recent Science and Society conference, which will be available online for all of you. And its name was Our House is Burning, Scientific and Societal Responses to Mass Extinction. The idea that biodiversity collapse, ecosystem perturbation is destroying much of the life that we know on our planet, I think is becoming accepted. And this conference was dedicated to bringing experts together, not only to acknowledge that this sixth mass extinction is happening, but also to provide solutions that we can use to fight it. We still have time to turn around the destruction that we have brought upon our planet. And for both our human health and our planetary health, it is our duty to actually use all of the resources and expertise that we have to try and change this. And we are engaging with society and policymakers to try and improve the decision making and change this world before it is too late. How can science rise up to the societal challenges that we have today? I think it's obvious from all of the news that we learn about every day that this is there are many of these challenges. Today's challenge of the pandemic is just one illustration of why healthy ecosystems are fundamental to life on our planet and to the well-being of humanity. And we believe that it is time to have a new era of science, of research and of science policy in order to combat these many challenges. To quote James Collins in 2009, we are the first generation of scientists with the tools to address the dimensions of biodiversity on this earth. But ironically, we may be the last generation with the opportunity to discover and understand Earth's biodiversity before it is irrevocably changed or lost. So this is the challenge that EMBL would like to rise up to. And in our future program, which we hope will start in 2022, supported by our member states, we would like to usher in a new era of molecular biology to understand life in context. We would actually like to understand the impact that environment has on life, both in a natural setting, but also in the fairly unnatural setting that we now have created. So this goes from understanding the responses and adaptation that communities have to emerging infectious diseases, to understanding the impact of climate change and pollution on human populations, but also on animal and plant populations, which are of course so crucial also to human health. So this program is dedicated to understanding biodiversity and trying to provide the solutions that will allow us to fight the changes that are happening and lead to a better planet and a better human society on our world. And so this new program focuses on many areas, and this includes infection biology. And we would like to set up novel approaches to study pathogens and not just viruses. There are other pathogens that we have to worry about, as we have seen in the past, and hopefully will be able to avoid in the future. And we would like to provide a unique set of resources, both in terms of data production, data sharing, but also mechanistic and molecular understanding of ecosystems and host pathogen interactions. And I want to just end with an example of the power that basic research has to provide solutions for the future. In the 1980s, EMBL scientist Jacques Dubochet was performing his basic research to try and understand certain types of cells and how they are infected by viruses. And he developed a technology that he needed to try and better preserve his samples in order to look at them at the atomic scale. It was these techniques that he developed that led to a revolutionary technique, cryo-EM, that many scientists are using today to understand how coronavirus is behaving when it infects cells. And it was this cryo-EM technology that won him the Nobel Prize a few years ago. But it was also thanks to this technology that a scientist at EMBL was able to research the cell surface proteins of the tick-borne encephalitis virus, TBEV. And it's thanks to this research and this data that was then generated around it, that the pharmaceutical industries were able to develop the vaccine that today is being used all over the world to vaccinate against this terrible form of encephalitis. So this is just to show you how an investment into basic research today provides the solutions of tomorrow, and not only the solutions from the point of view of understanding disease, but also for combating it. So this is my last slide. EMBL's mission is to enable science for and with society. We are here to help scientists around the world, and we are also here to provide the tools that allow scientists to communicate and to communicate with society. We would like to build bridges between molecular biologists and new disciplines, and we would like to engage with our member states around Europe, but more widely around the world, to try and move forward with a new generation of scientists that will able to provide a lead in the life sciences area and rise up to today's challenges and also tomorrow's for human and planetary health. I would like to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Edith Hurd. Dear colleagues, Professor Hurd is, as we heard, the Director General of the EMBL. She's provided us a very inspiring keynote speech. Congratulations, Professor Hurd, for the excellent presentation, overview, and also providing us some maybe understanding of how we could combat this very shrewd virus simply by sharing information, data sharing, and also promoting this international scientific collaboration. So thank you very much. We will take questions later on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us and sharing with us a very passionate keynote speech. Thank you. We're delighted to have you with us, and also that could share with us such knowledge and data about the virus itself. And I understand from your presentation that while the virus is shrewd, human beings are more shrewder, and we are going to get to the bottom of this pandemic. So thank you very much. Thank you. Colleagues, you're all aware that UNESCO, as the UN organization for science and promoting scientific collaboration across the world, produces regularly what is called the UNESCO Science Report. This report, produced every 5 years, brings together scientific trends from across the world and is an important toolbox for countries to understand the evolution of science, the trends, the role of investment, and how other countries are all faring, and how other countries are actually using science and technology towards their knowledge societies and economic development. So we're delighted to have with us here to present to us in a short overview the next UNESCO Science Report. And I'd like to invite Ms. Susan Schneeger to give a very short presentation and a bird's eye view, a snapshot of the next UNESCO Science Report, which will be launched in 2021. Thank you, Susan, and over to you. Susan, can you unmute, please? Thank you. Over to you.
Apologies. Yes. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Yes, I'm going to make a presentation today. The UNESCO Science Report, as Shamila explained, is a report which appears every 5 years. The next report will be released in April 2021. And the report takes the pulse of the health, if you like, of the support system for science around the world. And the next report will be focusing a lot on monitoring progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. These goals were adopted by all the United Nations member states in 2015. So to help us monitor progress towards the early progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals, we commissioned a study of 56 research topics are relevant to the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of these research topics I would like to focus on in my short presentation, because it is relevant to the topic today, and that is trends in global research into new and re-emerging viruses that can infect humans. So you can see from this first slide that the actual volume of publications on this topic is very modest. it's approximately 0.02% of global output on scientific publications in health sciences. And you can see also that the growth rate was only 2% between 2011 and 2019. So I should at this point specify that when we refer here to new or re-emerging viruses that can affect humans, we're excluding research on HIV because we made that a separate topic. And of course, it also excludes research on COVID-19 because of the period covered. So the top 10 countries for output on new and re-emerging viruses between 2011 and 2019 were the USA, China, and the United Kingdom. The USA even accounted for 35% of output on this topic. The countries with the strongest specialization are the USA, Brazil, and France. Specialization you can see in the second column here. One refers to the average global proportion of articles on a given topic. So anything over one shows a specialization. And it will be interesting, perhaps in the context of COVID-19, to see that although China produces a lot of publications, it, between 2011 and 2019, did not actually specialize in the topic of new and re-emerging viruses that can infect humans. In terms of growth rate, the countries in the top 10 which showed the fastest progress were Brazil and India. So here on this next slide, you can see the top 10 countries for growth in research on new and emerging viruses. Obviously, Brazil is not on the same scale because their output is much bigger. You can see that after the Ebola outbreak in 2014 and then the Zika outbreak in 2015, which affected Brazil and Colombia, and also the USA. The USA now has on its territory viruses such as Zika, dengue, chikungunya. So of course, this is one motivation for international scientific collaboration. There's quite a surge in output among these countries. Sierra Leone, Democratic Republic of Congo, Guinea, and Liberia were, of course, severely affected by the Ebola virus. So if we move to the next slide, now this is particularly interesting because you can see from this that the share of scientific publications by scientists from low-income countries has really surged between 2011 and 2019, from 1.7% of the global total to 4.9%. Now, among low-income countries, of course, there is a very high rate of international scientific collaboration. 70% of articles have a foreign co-author. The totals here exceed 100% because of co-authorship, which is very frequent. But you can see also among the middle-income countries that there was strong growth in the share of articles on this topic. Now, just summarize a few of the take-home measures. You can see from the tables that preceded that output on new and re-emerging viruses that can infect humans remains modest, despite growth in countries affected by viral outbreaks since 2011. The strong growth in research on this topic in low and middle income countries shows the value of international scientific collaboration in tackling pandemics. The high level of collaboration augurs well for the fight against COVID-19. And in fact, even among OECD countries, there was a strong growth between 2015 and 2019 in the share of internationally co-authored papers from 31% to 36%. Another take-home message would be that the current focus in research on new and re-emerging viruses is reactive rather than proactive. Now, of course, the big question that I shall leave you with is, will the trend towards greater output on new and re-emerging viruses that can infect humans outlast COVID-19? Or will the topic lose priority once the memory of COVID-19 fades? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Susan, for this bird's eye view and snapshot of the new UNESCO science report we launch next year. You've left us with quite a few questions at heart. What is the health of our life support systems, which is the scientific base of countries? And how do we walk the talk and ensure that we invest in more and better science? So thank you for this. I would also like to thank all our panelists. There's a good chat going on in the side. I would recommend everybody to contribute to the chat group. We will come back to you later on. Now, dear colleagues, we put together a very ambitious panel here today to answer some of the questions, give their perspectives, and we have three very eminent, prominent panelists to give their perspectives on some of the key issues relating to science with and for society. I would like to call upon Professor Zakri Abdul Hamid. We also, you're online, sir, thank you. So, dear colleagues, we have the pleasure to welcome Professor Zakri, who you probably all know is a very distinguished professor and well known for all his research. He's joining us from all across the oceans, from Malaysia. He was the senior science advisor to the Prime Minister of Malaysia. He's the chairman of the Atri Advisory Committee. Thank you for joining us, Professor Zakri. We also have with us, dear colleagues, our second panelist, who is Honorable Professor Amon Murwira, the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology of Zimbabwe. Unfortunately, was unable to join us. We have his representative, Dr. Wiganda, who is with us and representing the Honorable Minister. Thank you for joining us, sir. We cannot see you. Yes, now we see you. Thank you. I see the beautiful hills of Africa behind you. Thank you for being with us. I would also like to welcome Mrs. Melina Sakiyama, the co-founder of Global Youth Biodiversity Network. Ms. Melina, you're with us. Thank you, ma'am. So, dear colleagues, could you please, I think it's very good that we see your faces, and we are going to give you the floor. So my colleagues are going to unmute you. And we welcome all of you to the session. I would like to ask a question to the panelists one by one. We will have a couple of minutes to respond to the questions, and maybe we can then do what we say a tour de table and come back to you with other questions. So before I give you the floor, we had one question for Professor Edith concerning international cooperation. And maybe I'm going to be bold to reframe the question from the chat. Would you be able to train scientists from the developing world? Do you have a program on international collaboration specifically for scientists from the developing world?
Thank you for the question. It's very, very timely, in fact, because yesterday in our Science and Society conference, this was a topic that came up. I've been talking with many of our member states in Europe because there's a real wish to set something up. And as a new Director General, I forgot to say this, but I've only been in my position for just over a year. This is something that we are looking into very actively. We already have contacts in South America and in India and also in Africa, and we would very much like to initiate this. So it's very high on my agenda, and I think this pandemic again has shown we need all this young talent from around the world to benefit from the knowledge that I hope EMBL can provide.
Thank you very much, Edith, Professor Hurd. I do hope that at least we would be able to support 50% of women to access brilliant science.
You can count on me. If there's one population I will be targeting, it is the women of this world.
Thank you very much. I would like to now call upon our panelists, and I have a first question for Professor Zakri. Could you please explain to us, from your experience, what would be the best way to foster science for and with society for a sustainable future?
Thank you, Shamila. I think we met virtually about 1 month ago when we were having the session with Peter Gluckman. If you could allow me, I have a small set of slides. I won't take so much time trying to elaborate on the question that you posed. But at the outset, I'll just say what I'm trying to relate later is to support what Professor Hurd discuss about the role of science. Slide, please. So I've been asked to talk on fostering science for and with society for a sustainable future. Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about a sustainable future, the thing that comes to mind, of course, is the 2030 development agenda. And this is very interesting because it places science at the core of achieving the 2030 development agenda. We need stronger science, more connected science. We need science that is more deeply integrated with policymaking. In 2012, the UN Secretary General, the former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, established his scientific advisory board, chaired by Madam Irina Bukova, of course. And arising from our 3-year work, we came up with this document, The Future of Scientific Advice to the UN. To respond to your question, Chair, these are some of the highlights of the report. And that is science deserves to be valued more highly employed, to be valued more used effectively by decision makers. We urge nations to invest more in science and technology. This is very important because if we look around, the industrialized countries invest a lot in R&D, whereas the developing or less developed countries, the investment in R&D is very small, mostly less than 1%. So SEI play a key role in achieving the SDGs. Two challenges threatening our sustainable future, of course, climate change and biodiversity loss. In actual fact, is two sides of the same coin. And really, ladies and gentlemen, when you talk about science and COVID-19, let me quote Sir Peter Gluckman, the president-elect of the International Council of Science, who says that this crisis represents the biggest science advice, science diplomacy challenge the world has faced together since the Second World War. I need to elaborate a bit the linkage between science and COVID-19. One, we no longer live in an era where we have to rely on assumptions or superstition. If we know what the virus is, we know how it spreads through the human population, we know how to fight it, how to treat it, and how to minimize the death rate from it. It's not only time to listen to what science tells us about it, but to understand some ways that the scientific world has enabled the best of humanity's response to it. One is the modern frontiers. With respect to COVID-19, within just weeks of the first reported case, scientists had identified the microscopic virus responsible for the disease and had sequenced its entire genome. And we also, scientists already understood how it was transmitted from person to person and how contagious the disease was. In fact, by early this year, we already knew what the best practices would be as a collective human society to minimize the death and infection from COVID. The second aspect is the value of basic research. And here I concur strongly with the argument forwarded by Professor Hurd, the value of basic research. We cannot know when a particular piece of knowledge will bear fruit, but let me remind you, eventually this would help us out. With respect to COVID-19, we are already seeing the payoff of wide swath of curiosity-driven research. For instance, studies into the population dynamics of bats led to the understanding of disease transmission of many of these vectors. The Human Genome Project is one of them, of course. Next. And the third one, the age of the fundamental, how fundamental science is so important. And here I list a number of those ranging from the high energy frontier, looking for new types and properties of matter and energy, to even those at the frontier of chemical-based life and so on. Too often, sometimes in times of crisis, these lines of inquiry are often the first to be treated as disposable, but disposing of them will fundamentally limit everything we build upon them. And these are some of the scenarios. Imagine trying to uncover the molecular structure or the DNA sequence of an infectious pathogen if we didn't have atomic theory as our foundation. And I listed a few of those advances made by science through basic research. Next. And so here I'm just saying that scientific investment needs to occur on the front lines of the current crisis, but also on a wide variety of curiosity driven frontiers, in particular at the fundamental level. Next. So as Professor Hurt told us, the COVID-19 is having a tremendous impact on our world at the present time, but our response can demonstrate just how far we have come as a civilization. Next. But I wanted to mention one thing here, the importance of the science policy nexus. This is the interface between science and public policy. Next. This, to me, is the last piece of a giant jigsaw puzzle trying to address the global, to overcome the global challenges. Let me share with you one quote from Gus Beth, former UNDP administrator. He's a biologist. And he was asked, what do you see as the biggest environmental challenge facing us today? And Gus said, I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, or climate change. I thought that 30 years of good science could address this problem. I was wrong. The top environmental problems, he said, are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with this, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists do not know how to do it. So ladies and gentlemen, in other words, even if we are armed with an avalanche of data, we would not be able to make a good impact if we don't interact with other stakeholders. And that stakeholders at the top of it will be the politicians and the policymakers. Next. So we need a cultural and social transformation, not only the science. Let's move on. So I just wanted to share with you some example. You remember the IPCC had done a great work on climate change, but their message has not really came across until they joined forces with Al Gore, who's a great science communicator. The rest was history, as they say. IPCC and Al Gore shared the Nobel Peace Prize. And there is a similar sister organization. This is the IPBES, Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, which is less known than IPCC, but when we released this report last year in Paris about the threat of extinction of 1 million species, the IPBES met Macron, and the French president agreed to be our champion. Next. So scientists must link up with political leaders. Next. I had some experience here engaging my prime minister and also others. Next. Next. So working with politicians, Shamila, is very important. Their motive is, of course, getting re-elected. Has been their #1 priority. Economy will always be their main concern, and also social well-being. Environment is important, but almost always as an afterthought. Science, technology, and innovation is reluctantly recognized as an underpinning of sustainable development. So that's the message to the scientific community. Last but not least, let me also share with you the need for international collaboration through, say, the science, the diplomacy. Let me end by quoting a quote from Gordon Brown, the British Prime Minister, when he said, "Many of the challenges we face today are international. And whether it's tackling climate change or fighting disease like COVID-19, these global problems require global solutions. That's why it is important for us to collaborate." Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Zakri. I think we will have a number of questions coming to you from the teams. We're collecting all the questions from all the participants. We've taken note, yes, we need to, perhaps one message coming is that we need to unite behind the science. We need a scientific culture. We need a culture of science. But I would like to throw out then perhaps a challenge to everybody. Can we put a face to science? It appears to be too abstract. It is not just the underpinning of the SDGs. It's the connector to each and every SDG. So we need to work together with you, and we need to ensure that we put a face to science and understand what is the role of science in society today. Sometimes scientists are too far and higher up and cannot communicate to people on the role of science in even putting food on our plate through post-harvest technologies or simply through the agricultural technology. So we need to do a better job, even as scientists, to produce the children we want for the future, to produce the scientists we want for the future, and to create this culture of science even among children, that they would want the science. So I think we have quite a bit to do for the future, and we have quite a bit to do to empower the children of future scientists. So thank you for sharing with us a number of ideas. We will come back to you later on with some of the questions from the participants, and thank you the participants for very active discussion ongoing in the webinar chat. Dear colleagues, I'd like to invite now the Honorable Professor Murwira to make a presentation represented by Dr. Willy Ganda. Thank you, Dr. Ganda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for asking me to present at this forum. I'm going to talk about why evidence-based decision-making is important in order to improve dialogue among scientists, government, and citizens, because we're coming from a policy background as government. One of the things that has become evident during this pandemic is the fact that decisions that governments make, if they are going to get buy-in from citizens and all the stakeholders, they must be evidence-based. And so evidence-based decision-making is important in that it removes subjectivity in decisions that government make and policymakers make. And when subjectivity has been removed, you ensure that there is buy-in from all the stakeholders. Firstly, for the scientists, I think evidence-based decision-making is important in that it makes sure then that scientists, when they are researching in order to address pertinent concerns and pertinent needs of citizens and government and policymakers. One of the things that has made science not a part of decision making has been the fact that policymakers often say that scientists, they are good in their, in their dust coats, in their labs, and what they do, it ends in the lab. But with the advent of COVID, you realize that now government realize that what happens in the lab can affect the whole economy, can affect the life of the whole citizenry. So dialogue that is based on dialogue can improve if there's evidence in making, because then policymakers will realize that they need scientists, which is what this pandemic has shown policymakers. More often, policymakers were used to dealing with visible enemies. And come COVID, the enemy is invisible. You cannot address it by guns. You cannot address it by the tools that normally we use to address some of the challenges that we make. So it is very important, I think, that evidence-based decision-making becomes part of how we make decisions in the policy arena. And for scientists, that ensures then that the scientists focus their research on things that address the pertinent needs of society. But for policymakers, I think one of the issues that you find is that before, or as usual before, policies normally are full of biases. Policymakers have got a lot of competing needs when they make decisions. And evidence normally is the last thing that you want, especially if the evidence goes against what you want. But I think policymakers in the advent of COVID have realized the importance of evidence, because we have noted, I think, globally in the response from different countries, that some countries that disregarded evidence or data have ended up with a higher cost from the pandemic. And so for policymakers, evidence-based decision making is critical in that it removes biases. And when biases are removed, you then make sure that in our programs, first of all, in formulating of our programs, our programs are informed by evidence. And secondly, in terms of how we do our monitoring and evaluation, we then make sure that we respect data, we respect scientists, we respect the other stakeholders that form the ecosystem in terms of decision making. And of course, for the general citizenry, again, what we have seen with COVID is that before, citizens generally globally have a mistrust for policymakers and decisions sometimes that policymakers make. But in the advent of COVID, I think evidence has helped greatly to inform citizens. One, of course, the importance of evidence itself, but of course that the citizens need to listen to evidence and scientists. Because COVID has affected every community you can think of. And most of the stories that you would find, for example, in terms of how some people were contracting the disease, they were laden with confessions of how people went against evidence from data and ended up being infected. So I think the importance of evidence in terms of improving dialogue among scientists, government, and citizen has been enhanced, I think, during this pandemic. And there is a general consensus in my view, or in our view, that the three stakeholders, first, government has realized the importance of using evidence. And of course, for the scientists, they've also realized the importance of focusing on those researches where they're addressing the needs of the citizen. And for the citizens, you'll find that most citizens have now developed the habit of listening to evidence, following it, and in some cases, contributing to evidence through making sure that the data that is gathered is what is happening on the ground. So thank you very much. I think that's my contribution in terms of why evidence-based decision-making is important in order to improve dialogue among scientists, government, and the general citizenry.
Dr. Ganda, thank you very much for sharing the insights coming from Africa and from Zimbabwe in particular on the role of evidence-based decision-making. We've seen this and the role of scientists in contributing that evidence-based decision-making to contain the pandemic. Thank you very much for your contributions. We will be able to share, I think, a report of this meeting with all the participants, and perhaps we'll even put them in touch with you so you can share on the ground actions that have taken to gather in a very coherent manner all this information that comes even from citizens to be able to contribute to the evidence-based decision making. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. Dear colleagues, I would like to give the floor now to Ms. Sakiyama. Thank you, Ms. Melina, who is going to share with us insights into why science plays a very important role for a life in peace, equity, and harmony with nature. Thank you, Ms. Melina. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Shamila. Thank you so much, colleagues and distinguished panelists. It has been a pleasure to hear you all. I am coming from the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. I am the co-founder of this network that brings together all sorts of young people, young scientists, young students, young practitioners around the world that are active on biodiversity. And it's such an honor to be part of this event today and to talk about something that is so timely and so important. I am really happy with everything that has been said today. What I'm going to present here is some reflections coming from my constituency, coming from my colleagues from the network. And it's about the socio-ecological crisis that we are living in. I think both Professor Edith and Professor Zakri have mentioned like the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, but we are also facing an inequality crisis as well. And this inequality has been kind of like consistent throughout the decades and the centuries even. And they are all coming in together at the moment. I think like we had in the past a period where we were separating in silos all these different challenges that we have to deal with. And I think like science did a hugely important role, had a hugely important role in that, in analyzing, in understanding all these challenges, in trying to find solutions. And I think science itself, now it's realizing that perhaps it's time to bring them all together again. Perhaps it's time to not treat those challenges into silos, into different categories, but perhaps the solutions and the pathways forward are in dealing with that all together. And I think like we are quite at the turn of the times. I would say like there are so many scientists and scientific reports and literature saying that we are reaching so many tipping points in those like social ecological crisis and those challenges that we are facing at the moment. And I think it's time for us. I mean, I am a biologist from Brazil, so I do have a foot in science myself. And it is a time for scientists all over the world and people involved in it to also rethink the role of science in finding pathways forward, in fighting those challenges. And I think we need to start thinking in terms of transformation. I think Professor Zakri's last slides, when he quoted Gustav Speth on that science needs to enable, for now, I suppose, to understand greed, selfishness, and apathy. I think this is a sign, and we need to transform, right? I think like the integration between different knowledge systems, different fields of knowledge coming together to think together about like those challenges that we're facing. I think that should be one of the pathways forward. And it has certainly being one that many young people around the world, our network represents more than 1 million young people in 145 countries. So like, and we have been discussing internally about the role of science. A lot of them, because they are active on biodiversity, are scientists themselves or early career scientists. And we are thinking that perhaps, we need, as scientists, we need to move one step forward. We need to connect with other like natural, social, different sciences. We need to connect with different knowledge systems. I think this has been a huge advancement in the latest years, because finally we are able to sort of like understand that, for instance, indigenous peoples and local communities around the world have a lot of experience, a lot of like knowledge related to the environment, related to nature. They have probably been one of the most successful stewards of nature that we have seen. They have accumulated centuries of like observation data, but it's in their format, right? It's in their system. And I think like for many decades and like Western science perhaps were not able to take into the account that wealth of knowledge. So I think now we are expanding. I know that Professor Zakri has been chair of IPES, and IPES has just released the global assessment report on biodiversity and ecosystem services, and it's one of the first like global intergovernmental attempts to really integrate these different knowledge systems. So I see that like science is trying to reinvent itself, is trying to transform. I don't think it's like an easy pathway, but I feel like a lot of young people around the world are placing a lot of hope that we will be able to reinvent science. And why I'm saying this? Because there is like I'm kind of thinking like a threat a little bit on the misinformation, the fake news, the disinformation that we are facing at the moment. And it's so much false information circulating, and it's so many like, and it's so complicated then to be able to progress in the sense, like Willy Ganda said, into evidence-based policymaking, into like evidence-based pathways forward, because like the way society is understanding the scientific information that is available, it's not anymore like so linear, right? Now we have a lot of questions, we have different organizations or groups or actors that are playing a role in disseminating information or into misleading information. So I think and we saw that with the COVID pandemic, how much false information was available like for people to sort of consume. And I think this is something that like we will have to address. This is something that younger people around the world are very concerned, and perhaps because we are more familiar with like digital communication tools, and we kind of like were born in the era where communications and so on were already more globalized. So I can see, for instance, that I can figure out much faster if an information is fake or not than my dad. My dad has difficulties sometimes, and I do think that people around the world are suffering from that. And I think that gives us a clue also in which pathway science needs to work a little bit more, because it means that we need to get closer to society. We need to like start integrating like peoples from different backgrounds or different like walks of life into the development of knowledge, into the creation of knowledge. And I think like co-producing, co-development, co-design of knowledge and science will be crucial, so that science can remain relevant and can remain like a guide, right, for our societies to keep like developing our systems, developing our ways of dealing with the world, our ways of tackling those challenges in an evidence-based, in an ethical, and in an objective manner. So I think like when I was younger and I wanted to become a scientist, I was a bit sort of like intimidated, for instance, because science can still be very hierarchical. Science, like the science sort of community, the academia community, can be still a bit sort of like intimidating, right? And I think we as scientists, we have a role in trying to approach more to society, in trying to integrate more with the needs of society. And I know that many decision makers have told me over the years like that, unfortunately or fortunately, decision making is about emotions as well. It is about like subjectiveness as well. And therefore, like if we want science to provide guidance for decision making, we will need to be able to deal with those dimensions of emotions, of subjectiveness, of like different elements that push humans to take decisions and push humans to take action. And I think like we might not understand at the moment, as especially natural scientists, how to understand greed and selfishness and apathy, but together with social scientists, together with psychologists, together with like philosophers, sociologists, we might find ways, and we might be able to like not just find ways for scientists themselves, but we might be able to do it together with society. We might be able to play a stronger role in society in facilitating that not just us, but everybody can develop their critical thinking, they can be able to deal better with uncertainties, with complexities, you know, and be able to take better decisions that are more ethical, that fosters equality, that fosters peace, and they are able to think and implement a world that can live in harmony with nature. So I think like these are some of like my thoughts. They're coming from like several discussions among young people that are active on biodiversity. And I think it's just some food for thought for all of us, like they're working with science at the moment. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you very much, Ms. Melina. Thank you for sharing with us your thoughts and ideas and bringing the voice of the youth to this important discussion of the World Science Day for Peace and Development. So thank you very much. We fully agree with you. We need to build a new generation of communication. We need to build a new generation of science journalists, how to be able to communicate in the digital era. As you say, a youth all have phones and cell phones, and this is the way they communicate with each other. So we need to build this new generation of science journalists and a new way of digital communication for scientists across the world today. But I do believe we also need to build a new generation of science diplomats who will be able to take the science out to society and bring the societal concerns and feedback to what science should be doing to address their needs. So this two-way communication is very important, and we look forward to working with you on that. Now, you mentioned that you have 1 million youth across the world. I would like to lay out a challenge for you that when we come back next year for the next World Science Day, could you increase that to 2 to 3 to 4 million and include the youth from the developing world so that they are part of this digital transformation, so that they're part of the scientific transformation? So that is my challenge to you. And living in harmony with nature is really at the heart of our work in promoting the knowledge-based systems that we need today, understanding the ecosystem services. And what do we mean by that? Simply a glass of water, which comes from our natural environment, is never appreciated the way we should. So how can we change the mindsets to understand how the water gets to us and what is the role of science and technology? These short, small narratives are very important for us to exchange with people. And I believe your youth will be able to take this message out and bring the concerns back also through the youth to build on the scientific dialogue we're having here today. So thank you very much for this. I see that there's quite a chat going on. Professor Edith, thank you so much. I noticed that you sent us your latest information on our house is burning. Perhaps we could also extend this out to our planet is disappearing and there's no planet B. So maybe that should be the next theme.
Absolutely. Actually, next year's conference will be on One Health, which I think everyone understands now is so critical. And in the new program, we actually have a whole section called planetary biology. And we really want to engage scientists around the world to take on the challenge of thinking about what's happening to our planet, but more particularly, and this is, I'm very grateful to Melina for her presentation, we really need to work, the scientists need to work with the activists and with the politicians. We need to change policies. We need to influence decision makers. And it is our duty as scientists to do this. So I believe very strongly that our role is to act as quickly as possible in order to make sure we can help what's happening to the world today. And we can, thanks to people like Melina, thanks to the youth, we really can.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Edith. We're launching what is called the Coalition for Nature, reorganizing, revalorizing the way we live with nature through restoring, transmitting the values of nature, preserving as well. And I believe that this intergenerational equity is very important. So I call upon all the scientists across the world to take over and to start twining with other scientists from developing countries, but also to start promoting scientific and technological transfer to countries to ensure that no one is left behind, but more so, build the capacity of the youth to take science forward. This intergenerational equity is really our responsibility towards future generations. So we look forward to working with you. I'm wondering whether we have time for 1 or 2 questions. I'm not sure we'll be able to take all the questions, but perhaps I have one question for you, for Edith. What have we learned from the COVID experience and the opportunities of sharing in-time knowledge and data? Thank you. Over to you.
Unmute, sorry. So yes, that's a very opportune question. It's very timely. And so I think, as far as I'm concerned, there's no appropriate sharing of data and knowledge, no reproducibility of results, and no reuse of data possible without open data and science. And in the case of a pandemic, international collaboration and the free flow of information and of data are of absolutely paramount importance. Our preparedness is actually directly correlated with the availability of long-term international infrastructures that can be redeployed and built on foundations that we already have. We cannot create something de novo. This pandemic showed us we need to build up our infrastructures and share our knowledge if we want to be prepared. So as far as I'm concerned, the other important point is research that we've learned is that both research and healthcare and their funding are too siloed. We partition this. I've seen this happen in many nations where research and health are almost in different universes, and they needed to work together immediately for this pandemic. So this is where we really have to make sure that the linking of data, such as the genomic data I mentioned earlier for viruses and patients, and clinical research data, cohorts, populations, where healthcare clinical data and public health data need improvements, and the barriers have to be removed to help rapid integration of all relevant data types. That's what this pandemic has shown us as scientists, and this is what we hope will change thanks to this pandemic. It's an opportunity. It's been a disaster, but it's also an opportunity to really break down those silos.
Thank you very much, Edith. We've got perhaps 1 or 2 persons in the chat group. There's a scientist from Guinea who would like to say a few words about young scientists in Guinea. Anna Pashik, I'm unable to find the name of the person. Could you please assist us?
Yes, it's Mr. Jean Kohn. His hand is up. I think just we need to give him the floor.
Yes.
Et il voulait parler aussi en français, donc on va lui donner la parole en français. Il faut juste techniquement qu'on lui permette de parler.
We just need to technically hand over the mic to him.
Allô?
Oui, alors.
Oui, bonjour.
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Koné. You have the floor.
D'accord, moi je suis Koné Jean, je suis président des associations de l'association Jeunes Scientifiques en Guinée. Du coup, on célèbre la Journée mondiale de la science au service de la paix et du développement en Guinée depuis 2018 dernier. Donc du coup, on a pas mal de difficultés par rapport au financement de ce projet en Guinée parce qu'il faut d'abord parler de l'utilité de la science. Même quand nous avons eu l'expérience de passer dans les médias avant l'événement, on en a connu plusieurs difficultés. Il faut, quand on parle de science,
encountered several difficulties in talking to the media about science. When we talk about science, people simply think it's a closed box to them, and we need to explain what we're going on about. So, my question is whether you would be able to organize such an event in countries of Africa, such as Guinea. Well, thank you very much for your question. We have several other speakers who wish to take the floor, but let me simply answer that we will do our utmost to ensure that the African Union, with all of the of UNESCO's offices in Africa, can organize webinars on science with other colleagues to promote World Science Day for Peace and Development. So our colleagues in Africa, in the UNESCO offices, will be in touch with you to assist you. And thank you very much, Mr. Jean Connet. We now have another question, which is to Mr. Zakri, Professor Zakri.
How do you improve the dialogue? Do you have one good example of how to improve the dialogue among scientists, government, and citizens? Thank you, Professor Zakri.
What's the question?
How would you improve? Give us an example, please, from your experience, how you managed to improve the dialogue between scientists, government, and citizen. Could you share with us briefly an experience? We know that it has been a success story in Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the compliment, Shamila. Let me give you one example. A few years ago, the Southeast Asian region was inundated by this haze problem resulting from the open burning of forests in a number of our countries. So that is really a question embedded in science. So the politician reached out to the scientific community, and we had a series of consultations among the scientists in the region. We know what to do, we know the solutions, but the problem is when it comes to that kind of issue, it is not the science that is lacking, but is the political will. So to respond to that, I think it's incumbent upon the scientific community to continuously engage our policymakers, our senior government officials, and eventually also other stakeholders like captains of industry, civil society, the youth movement. It's only through concerted pressure from the citizens that things can be solved. So the haze problem in some sense has been a good experience for us. It has been overcome somewhat, but it's still not complete because politics got in the way. So even, last month, there was this UN World Summit on Biodiversity. And there was a so-called Leaders Pledge for Nature. And Shamila, there's nearly about 200 member states in the UN. And that document up to now was only signed by about 70 world leaders. So if only we can make them feel aware, feel obliged, and clear their conscience and have a bigger sign up for this kind of document, it will be good for a sustainable future.
Thank you very much, Professor Zakri. I would like to inform all our dear colleagues who are online, our partners, the participants, our distinguished panelists, that UNESCO has joined the Leaders Pledge for Nature. We've been an active partner. As you're probably all aware, UNESCO is home to designated sites biosphere reserves, geoparks, as well as the natural and cultural heritage sites. And we are promoting really living in harmony with nature, scientific monitoring, and understanding the socio-cultural dimensions of living in harmony with nature, but also the impact of nature on people. And we believe that this is an important tool also that can be used by member states. You say there are only 70 world leaders that have joined this pledge. Well, Professor Zakri, I think that is a challenge to Melina with her 1 million youth to mobilize the youth to influence the leaders across the world so the rest would sign up to this. So that is a challenge we give out to Melina today. Dear colleagues, I think I would also like to share with you something really important. Last week, the Director General of UNESCO, together with the Director General of the World Health Organization and the High Commissioner for Human Rights, launched the appeal. And this appeal for access to science and technology, access to knowledge, to data, information sharing, especially due to this COVID. And we believe that this appeal could be taken forth by all our 245 participants here today to start the movement. The movement is open science. The movement is access to scientific information to reduce the knowledge gap between those countries who have the information, those do not. And this is a very important appeal from UNESCO that was launched over a week ago. And we invite you all to join this call. In promoting the open science principles, we should not forget the rigor of science and scientific research. And here, I think Edith has highlighted this to us in demonstrating to us the real scientific research at EMBL, and there is no compromise on scientific rigor. So this is what we need to promote as well. No misinformation, no miscommunication, no fake news. Science is science. Science is factual. Science is proven. Science can promote our well-being today and contribute to all the SDGs if we valorize the principles of science today. So thank you very much, dear colleagues. It's been a pleasure to welcome you to this webinar on the World Science Day for Peace and Development, with a very special theme today of science for and with society in dealing with the COVID-19. And I would like to leave you as a special message. We need to unite. We need to unite behind the science. But what we need to do together, and the biggest challenge of humanity today, is how to build back better. And so therefore we are calling for the scientific humanism, so that science means development challenges today. We cannot promote peaceful societies when the majority of the people in the world do not have access to the benefits of science, technology, and innovation. So therefore, UNESCO's role is to promote the scientific humanism across the world. And we would like you all to join us in this appeal to ensure that access to science, technology, and innovation is equal and benefits all of humanity today. So thank you very much, dear colleagues. And I would like to ask everybody to unmute, and a big hand of applause to our keynote speaker, Professor Edith, to Professor Zakri, to Ms. Melina, and also to Professor Willie Ganda, to Susan Schneegans, to our distinguished colleagues here in the Secretariat, Anna Pashik and her team, Yoslin Noor, Anna Paula, Fereshete, and all those who've contributed to bringing us here together. Our dear translators, thank you for being with us. This is not easy to translate in a very dynamic session like this. You've done a brilliant job. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you very much. And let's spread the word. Yes, it's possible. Science for and with society in dealing with the COVID, a true demonstration of solidarity for science today. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Congratulations.